Okay, so this morning I already did my first project over there, spraying down the trees with insecticide to get rid of the June bugs or the Japanese beetles, whichever one they were. Now my next project is to change the oil on my 2006 Toyota Camry. My Camry has 250,000 miles on it. It's been a very dependable car. We bought it used in 2006. I think it was September. Had 10,000 miles on it. So we've had 242,000 remarkably worry-free miles. The only thing I've done to this car mechanically is replace the struts on the front and the water pump. The struts, well, didn't have to be done, but the ride was getting a little sloppy, so I did those last year. The water pump had actually developed a small leak, and so I had to do that one last year. So for both of those, I went on YouTube and got some instructional videos that were spot on. It made it very easy to do this work. So I thought I would just, this is not going to be a detailed instructional video by any means, but I just thought, I'd just show you what it takes to change the oil on a car. So the first thing I'm going to do, well, I've already gotten the oil, and I'll show you what that is in a little bit. What I'm going to do is go get my ramps, and we'll get this thing up on the ramps. Up on the ramps, right there, see? And looks like we're in good shape there. Car's a little bit off, but that's okay. So now we're going to pop the hood. Okay, so we've popped the hood, and of course now it's going to rain, so I didn't expect it to rain today. It rained this morning. It was supposed to all blow out. But anyway, we might have to pause for a minute. And so now we're going to proceed with the oil change. Here's the oil that I generally use. From my standpoint, it really doesn't matter what kind of oil it is. I probably wouldn't use recycled oil, but I'm more than happy to go to Walmart and get this SuperTech 20W50 motor oil and corresponding oil filter. I mean, basically to me, unless you're going to really go whole hog and get synthetic oil, which is, better, even though I don't think that it provides any long-term economic benefit. You might as well just stick with the cheapest stuff you can get, because if you're changing it regularly, like my maintenance light comes on every 5,000 miles, and I might let it go over a little bit, but basically every 5,000 miles the oil in this car gets changed. And as I've said before, it's lasted me 250,000 miles, and so my personal experience with cars is you're kind of wasting your money buying more expensive oil, because basically oil is oil. And I know that there are some people who might disagree with that, but as long as you keep it changed, the big thing is keeping the dirt out. Keeping the, whatever wear and tear takes place on the inside of your engine, little metal, little metal particles and other gunk that might build up. That's the big thing, and just changing the oil takes care of those things. All oil has the right additives to keep it flowing. So that's my take on it. If you don't agree, please feel free to comment. So now we're going to go find some wrenches and something to lay on, because as you see, I have a gravel driveway, and that can be rather uncomfortable. And there's Chakamato, our cat. He's a very cool cat. Just thought we'd get him some cheese. That's his nickname. So he has several names, like all of our other. What do you think about this, Cheese? Do you like changing the oil? I don't think he cares. I think he just likes to be petted. I think that's what he likes. So anyway, we'll be back in a minute with something to lay on and a wrench or two, and we'll get started on this. In addition to, notice I got all these wrenches out because I couldn't remember what size. Could not remember what size the bolt was on the oil pan. Turns out it is a 9/16. Well, actually it's not a 9/16. It is a 14 millimeter, but usually 9/16 and 14 millimeter. If you've got a 14 millimeter bolt, 9/16 will probably work. If you have a 9/16 inch bolt, a 14 millimeter may or may not work. to get around it. That's our conversion lesson for the day. That is not hydraulic fluid in there. That's just a 5-gallon bucket that I cut off. And you'll notice that it fits under there quite nicely. So I don't spill any oil onto the ground. Here's Cheese. He is very curious about what's going on. This rag I use to grasp the oil filter. One thing a lot of people do when they're putting on an oil filter is they tighten it up way too much. You know, an oil filter should be put in hand tight. You know, I put the oil filter in until it's snug, till the rubber gasket hits the mating surface, and then I turn it about another quarter turn, and then I stop, because that's all you need. I mean, that rubber gasket is about 1/8 of an inch thick, so you really don't need, you really don't need to crank down on that thing. It's kind of like cranking down on an old faucet, the kind that used to have the washers in them. If you still have those, you know what I mean. The more you crank down on them to get it to drip, the more it tears up that gasket on the inside. So you really don't want to do that. So let's look under here for a minute, and I'll show you where all the various pieces and parts are. See, hopefully, there's the bolt that I need to take out of the bottom of the oil pan. So I will position the bucket a little bit off center maybe. I have never found a good way to take that bolt out of there without dropping it into the bucket. If anybody has any ideas, please let me know, but I pretty much just loosen it and let it fall down in there and fish it out later with a magnet. Up under here, you can see there is that right there where my thumb is, that is the oil filter, and we're just going to turn that counterclockwise to get it out. And I just tested it a second ago to make sure I didn't spend any extra time or waste any time, and it's with a little bit of force it came right loose. And so that's another thing when you're changing your oil, you have to be aware that even though you're going to take that bolt out first and you're going to get most of the oil out, there's still going to be some oil that comes out when you actually unscrew that oil filter all the way. So you have to make sure that your bucket is completely underneath this. And of course, this protective covering under here that Toyota put in, which it serves a good purpose, aerodynamics, I think, mostly keeps the air flowing under the car. So you're going to get some on the top of that, and it just really can't be helped. So the idea is to mitigate that inevitable spillage so that it doesn't amount to more than a couple ounces. And that's just the best you can do. It's one of the advantages of having gravel is that if a little bit spills out, at least you haven't ruined a nice concrete garage floor. While we're under here, take a look around. Take a look around, see if anything's amiss. I mean, seriously, for a 10-year-old car, this is incredibly clean. Toyota really knows what they're doing, which is why I would really hesitate to buy anything but a Toyota. Well, I would consider a Honda, but I don't know. Toyota's #1 for me. Unscrewing the bolt, and there you go. See, there the oil goes right in there. Yeah, it's not real fun to fish it out later, but that's okay. And of course, Cheese has to be in here up all in my mix, but that's okay because I like it. I'll just give him a little pat to get him out of the way. Cheese, go away. He's such a good cat. You can see here we have our bucket. One way to get the bolt out without using a magnet or any other mechanical device is to, basically what you do is you tilt the bucket like in this direction until you hear the bolt slide to the other end, and then rotate it 180 degrees, and then very gently tilt it the other direction, and then you can get it out. So let's do that. I'm sorry I can't show you because I only got, if I had 3 hands I could do it for you. So got the bolt out. There it is. Make sure that it is nice and clean, which this is. Of course it should be, because it's basically covered with oil and I just wiped it off. And so now we're going to put this back in the oil pan. Make sure it's snug. Again, this is one of those things you do not want to over tighten. Get it snug. In this case, there's no gasket. Maybe another 1/16 of a turn will get that so it will not come back out. You notice the threads on this are rather fine anyway, so it would it would be difficult for this to vibrate loose. Just get it snug, crank it down another 1/16 of a turn, and it'll stay in there forever until until the next oil change. Reach up in there and untwist this oil filter, and what we're going to do is when it comes loose, we're just going to let it drop right into the bucket. We're not even going to worry about it. You can see that's where the oil filter attaches. Of course, you can also see that it's not exactly a clean process, but there you have it. So now we are ready to put the oil filter, the new oil filter, back in. Okay, we've got our oil filter out, the new one, I mean, out of the box. I should be more specific. So what you want to do is you just want to stick your finger in the top of your oil container here and put a little bit of oil, doesn't need to be much, just around that rubber gasket, so that when it meets that metal surface up there, that we don't get any binding and it makes a good seal. Got that puppy in there, got it as tight as I can get it with my hand, which I found to be perfectly acceptable, and don't have to worry about it coming unscrewed at all. So next step is to go up top. So our work under here is done. Got our oil filter in, we've got our oil pan bolt secure, and so that's really it. So basically just wipe off some of this excess oil. Of course this this rag is toast when this job is done, but that's just kind of the cost of doing business. It was only about 50 cents anyway, so no big deal. We take off the cap and set it where we won't lose it, like over here on the battery. You get these 5, well, let me see, what is this? This is actually, 5 quarts. If you can see that, I hope you can. It's got a gauge on there of sorts. 4 quarts, 3 quarts, 2 quarts, 1 quart. So we were going to pour, excuse me, we are going to pour the oil in there until we get down to that 1 quart line, because this particular engine takes 4 quarts and not 5 quarts. Now, my wife's car has a V6 and it takes all 5, so you just dump the whole thing in there. But on this one, you have to be a little bit careful. You do not want to overfill your oil. It can lead to air inside the oil, and it will make it, well, basically not work the way it's supposed to and ruin your engine. So you got to be careful with this to make sure you don't put more than 4 quarts of oil, and if your engine only calls for 4 quarts. Not really asserting that that container is level or anything, but that's right at the 1 quart line. And so we are going to put the cap back on where the oil filler location is, and then it's very important to start the car and take it down off the jacks before we do a final oil level check and make sure it's okay. Off the jacks, and I've checked the oil, and I think you can see that pretty well, that although we are within an acceptable range, I'm going to go ahead and add maybe another quarter to a half a quart to get that level more up to the actual full mark on my oil. I hope you can see, of course, the oil starting to run up the dipstick a little bit because it's slanted downward towards the handle there, but it was about 1/8 of an inch below the full mark, and that's good enough for me. So we're going to do that, and we're going to put this dipstick back in, and then there is one other little thing we have to take care of, but that's on the inside of the car, in the cab. You will see that there is a little maintenance required light that is still lit up And this is not a check engine light, and that's very important to understand the difference. Check engine light is elsewhere on this display, but maintenance required is simply a light that tells you that it's been 5,000 miles since you've changed the oil last. And so it's a nice little feature that Toyotas have. I'm sure other manufacturers do too, but since I've only had Toyota for the last 10 years now, it's the only one I'm aware of. But there is a procedure to clear that. The first thing you want to do is, of course, turn your engine off. Well, you don't have to turn your engine off, actually. But what you want to do is you want to make sure your odometer is set to odometer rather than trip A or trip B. And I'm going to see, I don't know if I can do this or not. I might be able to if I can get it in here, because it does take both hands. So what you want to do is turn off the engine. You want to press the selector switch that lets you switch from odometer to trip A to trip B. Turn the engine on and start it, and then hopefully what you see on the display there, no, we don't. So I think I'm going to have to hold on, let me get it back to odometer, turn it off. That might be the trick. I think maybe you have to press odometer before you turn the, we'll see if that works. Can you turn it back on? No. I'm going to have to do this with both hands. I just can't do it. So, hold on. Okay, so I thought I had actually recorded the correct procedure to turn off the maintenance light in my 2006 Toyota Camry, but, well, these are the foibles of modern technology. So, to reset your maintenance light switch, the procedure for a Camry, 2006 Camry, and probably for most Toyotas, is to have your ignition switch on, press your selector switch, and cycle through the display until your odometer is reading and not either trip A or trip B is displayed. Hold that selector switch down, turn the ignition off, turn the ignition on. I don't think you actually have to have the engine started. I don't think that's important, although I usually start the engine, so I didn't test it both ways, and now that the maintenance switch is off, I don't know. Once you turn the ignition switch on and or turn the engine on, you will get some display on your odometer, a series of dashes, and that will indicate that it is resetting. If once that is finished and it displays the mileage, if you look over to your maintenance switch, your maintenance light, you will see that it's no longer displayed, and that is how you reset that, and that completes the oil change on your 2006 Toyota Camry, and probably, well, certainly from 2002 to 2006, and I would think any modern Toyota subsequent to that will probably have the same procedure. Other makes and models, your mileage may vary. YMMV. As usual, thank you so much for watching our videos. If you find this helpful, please comment and please like and please subscribe. We really appreciate it. Thank you.